Hi, this is Dr. Wells again, in case you don't recognize me. Um, I'm going to start with a series of lectures on the deduction uh, chapter. Um, and you have until May the 8th to finish the quizzes. There's several videos that you need to watch, and the quizzes are identified as quizzes. You take one and then the other. You only get one. You only get to take it one time, and of course you can use your notes and whatever you have while you take the quiz. But do a good job preparing for it, so you don't want to miss a lot of questions. Okay, this lecture is the new version of deduction, and you should have a copy of it while I'm lecturing, because there's some diagrams that are involved. Okay, the first thing that we're going to talk about here is critical thinking and belief. Okay, obviously beliefs affect our critical thinking, and our critical thinking can affect our beliefs. Usually it's the beliefs that affect the critical thinking. Usually our beliefs are more powerful than a reasoned argument. Unfortunately, that's true for many people. However, we're learning how to respect a good argument and be willing to alter our beliefs if it turns out that there's a good reason to. So the first understanding of beliefs that we need is the relationship between belief and doubt. And again, I hope you have your copy of the notes with you so you can follow along. Belief is comfortable. We arrive at a belief and we kind of like sit on it, like we're sitting on a comfortable chair, comfortable couch. And there's really no need to get up and go anywhere because it feels good. However, sometimes we may encounter something that causes us to question or doubt the belief. And Peirce, who is an American philosopher, called that a surprise, something that makes us look at our belief and contemplating whether to change it or not. So after belief, we get surprise, and then we go to doubt. Doubt is when we no longer think our original belief is correct, but don't have a replacement belief to substitute. And so doubt leads to inquiry. Inquiry is when we conduct an investigation. This can be done extremely poorly or extremely well. And so after we've conducted our investigation or inquiry, we either reaffirm our original belief, come up with a new belief, or remain in doubt. So we're going to go through 4 ways of the settlement of belief, or the ways that we go from doubt to a new belief. There's 4 basic kinds of belief settlement. We have 4 basic ways that we can arrive at our beliefs when we feel that there is a need to do so. Okay, the first one is called tenacity. And tenacity is basically we're very, very firm about our beliefs, so firm that we are really unwilling to give them up for basically any reason at all. And one way of looking at it can be that tenacity is where you hold on to something, you cling to it, you cling to your beliefs and won't give them up. in spite of any evidence to the contrary. And so one way of understanding it is that it's a refusal to doubt. So you get surprised, but it doesn't matter. You just go back to the original belief. You hold on to the original belief. Okay, the second type of method of arriving at beliefs is called authority. And in the case of authority, we turn over our beliefs to some external entity, such as a church or a club or political party or our family or a teacher, any individual or organization outside ourselves that is basically telling us what we ought to believe. Now, this can be either bad, where you're turning your beliefs over to something or someone who does not have the requisite authority or qualifications. Or it can be good if you turn your beliefs over to someone who does have the authority or has more experience. So one of the things we need to do as critical thinkers is to be able to see the difference. Are we accepting beliefs from someone who deserves that kind of respect or not? Okay, so another point that Peirce makes, he's the philosopher, is that authority is like community tenacity. Remember, tenacity, we just cling to our beliefs. Authority is we are having our beliefs determined by some outside force. And it's in a way tenacity that is the belief. A belief is tenaciously held on a community basis rather than an individual basis. Because if we do tenacity on an individual basis, the ultimate result is some kind of conflict, because neither side will give up their beliefs for anything. Something like the Crusades in Christian Crusades in the Middle East back in the 11th or 12th century, where Muslims and Christians were battling, and neither side would look at their beliefs from a critical standpoint. And so the only method of resolving it was war. So the ultimate problem of tenacity is it can lead to war. Well, we can avoid that if we have community belief, where our beliefs are determined by a larger group, hopefully one that decides not to go to war, and that therefore it has a social function. So the social function of authority is to resolve differences that we find in tenacity. Okay, the third kind of settlement of belief is called a priority, or confirmation bias. And if you remember from watching the movie way back at the beginning here, that was Here Be Dragons, they identified one kind of fallacy, and that was confirmation bias. And that's where we have a set of beliefs that we feel quite strongly about, and we look at evidence to only look at evidence that confirms that belief, or in other words, that reinforces what we believe in the first place, and ignore any evidence to the contrary. And then finally, there is, oh, by the way, that's also called a priority. Confirmation bias and a priority are the same thing. Finally, we come to critical thinking, or the scientific method of belief. And that's where, if we have a surprise, we attempt to find a new belief, and we base it on evidence. And so what we do is we say, okay, well, if I were lecturing in a regular classroom and I turned around and everybody was gone, I would have to try to figure out where you all went. There's no trace of you. And so I come up with a hypothesis. I think you are in the parking lot. And so I go out of the classroom and look in the parking lot. Now, that's called a test. I'm testing my hypothesis. My hypothesis is that you're in the parking lot. So I look in the parking lot and you're not there. So that hypothesis has been disproven. So I adopt another hypothesis, or I tentatively adopt it, and I think that you might be in another classroom. And so to test that, I start walking around from one classroom to the other, and finally, lo and behold, there you are in a different classroom. Okay, so that hypothesis has now been confirmed. And so that's the way that the scientific method does. It's open to evidence, and it takes evidence and tests it objectively. One of the interesting things that Peirce said about the scientific method of fixing belief was that it was self-correcting. It could be wrong. In other words, my first hypothesis was that you were out in the parking lot, and I used the scientific method. I went out and tested that belief and looked in the parking lot, and you weren't there. So I dropped that. So then my next one was that you're in another classroom, and that turned out to be true. So what the scientific method does is it's self-correcting. If you apply the scientific method, it will eventually lead you to, it will identify false beliefs and maybe what the true belief is. It does it by an objective process of hypothesis and then testing, which is exactly what we want to do in critical thinking. So I think we've gone about far enough in this first lecture, and there will be a couple more of these videos.